We are live and recording. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to get cracking. I think there's people still joining all the time, but we're conscious of time, so we're going to get moving with it today. So thanks so much for joining if you're there. I'm Ben Holland from Q Content. We're a content agency based in Bath. This is the first one of these regular events that we're running, so hopefully it will go smoothly. We're getting more and more used to these virtual events over the summer, so it's a different way of interacting, isn't it? So as advertised, we're going to try and keep things moving. We're going to keep today's session to 30 minutes. We've got a Q&A as well. The recording or the session is being recorded, so you will be sent a link after the event to the recording so that you can go back in. So don't worry if you do have to check out at any point, or if you're frantically trying to make notes and not managing to keep up. So you will get a recording. You'll notice down in the bottom of your screen there is a function for a chat. So if you do want to say hi or add any comments, you're more than welcome to do so. Please be nice. There is also a button there specifically for asking a question. So at the end of the session, we're going to do a Q&A, and we'll catch up on some of the questions that you've asked as we've been going along. So please feel free to fire them in as you think of them, and then we'll collect them all towards the end. So if you want to use that live chat or the Q&A, and there's also a couple of polls running down the bottom there as well. So if you want to take part in those, that would be great. So a quick bit of context to today's discussion. It's no big secret that it's been an interesting year for everybody with the current COVID situation, and obviously particularly charities have been hit really hard by what's been going on. A lot of people worried about the financial situation, and redundancies and money being tight obviously creates its own challenges. But I think also with lockdown and social distancing, that's had a real impact on traditional fundraising methods, and just for all of us, the ways that we would normally engage with our customers or our clients or whoever that might be. So we thought it would be a good time to run a quick session, particularly aimed at the charity sector, and look at some of the impact that COVID might have had, but really not dwelling on the kind of negative, but to look at some of the practical things that you might want to have on your radar, or where you could be focusing your efforts moving forward to try and negate some of that negativity, I guess. So we're really pleased to be joined by Zoe today, who's going to be presenting some information to you. I put some of her information on the registration page. She was recently voted one of the 25 most influential charity leaders. I'll try not to embarrass her too much down there in the corner. She's chair of the Charity Digital Code of Practice and a regular contributor to Third Sector. And I think interestingly, Zoe's team produced the annual Charity Digital Skills Report, and she's going to be presenting some of the key highlights from that in this session, along with some practical tips in terms of digital marketing and, as I say, where you can focus your efforts. So I'm conscious of time. That's quite enough from me. So sit back and enjoy, and I'm going to introduce Zoe and bring her to the screen now.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Ben. Thank you very much for having me today. And I'm really excited to be here. As Ben very rightly said, I'm going to take you through a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the key sector trends about digital marketing from the Charity Digital Skills Report. I just wanted to reference there the fact that the Charity Digital Skills Report is quite broad in focus. So we also cover things like digital service delivery, digital transformation, trustee skills, etc. So I hope that after today, you will go away and dig into the report a bit more, but I'm focusing just on digital marketing today. So key trends. I will also be looking at some of the practical things that you can do and where your areas of focus should be over the next few months. So those are the key things I'll be focusing on. Like Ben says, I'm really conscious that these sessions are a bit of a lunchtime espresso to get you thinking. So I'm going to be talking for about 10 to 15 minutes, just taking you through those 3 key points. And then following that, we will go into Q&A. So Ben, are my slides up? Am I good to go on that? Oh, lovely. Thank you. What a pro. Thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to the first slide. So what we will be talking about today is obviously those key highlights, how you can review your digital marketing efforts, and then also where you need to focus. So those are the 3 key things that we'll be looking at today. So let's begin by finding out a bit about where the sector is at with digital marketing skills. So before we start to have a look at those trends, I thought it would be great to hear a bit about some of the digital marketing challenges that you've faced during COVID-19. So we'll dive into those key trends and stats at the moment, but we have a lovely chat box at the side. If you would be able to just drop in there right now what you think has been the biggest digital marketing challenge for you since we went into lockdown, do pop that in there, and we'll come back to some of those themes as part of the Q&A. So off you go. Do drop that into the box. No live events, absolutely. And look at us all here now. I'll leave everyone to put any other thoughts they've. Oh, some great stuff coming through. Low engagement rates on social. That's very interesting, Smita. It'd be good to think about why that is, perhaps whether user habits have changed. So I look forward to digging into that more in Q&A. Really good point there from Helen about information overload. I think that was a particularly big issue right at the start of lockdown, where there was so much content and there were so many different things people were getting to grips with professionally, personally, on and offline. Obviously lots of stuff there about building relationships remotely. Rich, that is a fantastic point about how you start to get to know key stakeholders, to influence them as well, whether they're within your organisation or outside as well. So very pertinent for some of the digital marketing initiatives you might be working on. And Pippa, I love the point you've put there about regrouping and thinking about where you go from here. So hopefully what we cover in today's presentation will give you some food for thought. Okay, so great. Thank you. So many good insights there about the challenges you're facing, from engagement to new ways of working, to the different ways you can persuade and influence at a time like this. Let's dive into some of the trends. So looking at what people told us as part of the Charity Digital Skills Report, what was really, really encouraging, and I think charities should be very much taking heart from this, is that social media was rated as the highest skill. So as you can see here, just under a third thought they were excellent at this. And that number had actually grown over the last few years. So I think this says something about how charities are getting more confident with social media. They've invested in their skills in that area, which in itself suggests we're building on a decent foundation for some organisations. So it'd be interesting as we get into the Q&A to hear where you're all at with that. When we look at things like email marketing, however, there does seem to be a bit of a skills gap there, as there does with SEO and ads. And that in itself, that last point, is a particular concern, given that that has also risen. All of this obviously needs to be absolutely driven by insight. It needs to be driven by what we're learning from the analytics about users. And I think that speaks to the excellent point that was just made in the icebreaker at the start, where you guys were talking about lower levels of engagement and some of your observations there. The engine that's really got to drive our success, our progress in digital marketing as a sector, has got to be that understanding of the data, what they mean, what these insights tell us about where our users are at and where they're going from here. So absolutely, that's got to be a key skill. So all these different skills that I've highlighted here: social media, email marketing, SEO and ads, website and analytics, I think that these should very much be the foundation of your digital marketing skills. Most of you will know that. Lots of you will have that within your digital teams, within your charities. But I think a really interesting point that a lot of charities are at now is how they begin to grow those skills outside the digital team, as they inevitably have to devolve some of their digital marketing efforts. So it'd be interesting to talk more in the Q&A about whether there's any particular challenges or opportunities you're facing within that. Okay, so a couple of other points which I thought were particularly pertinent to digital marketing, building on what we were just saying about some of the skills gaps about making the most of the website and also analytics. You can see here that a significant number, so 42%, rate themselves poor at using, managing and analysing data. And again, this goes right to the heart of how we can judge the efforts of our digital marketing. So if that's an area where your charity needs some additional support, I think there's so much great stuff out there now for free. Back in the day when I was starting digital marketing, there were loads of really good videos you could watch on YouTube. General Assembly obviously has some fantastic courses. There's lots and lots of really good stuff out there now to support all organisations in growing their skills. On a related note, clearly this has been the year of digital fundraising. There's been so many organisations where they can't run those face-to-face events or have a coffee morning, send people out to run the marathon. So it's particularly troubling that it's an area where charities lack confidence, which says to me it's a skill which is still relatively new to the charity sector, with some obvious exceptions of organisations who have been doing it really well for a while. So I think this shows how there's a lot of potential for this area. And this speaks to the wider point about how the traditional charity fundraising model of monthly direct debits and just focusing on regular individual giving is broken. And the pandemic has very much shown how we need to adapt as a sector. We need to get to grips with new ways of fundraising. We need to diversify how we fundraise and begin to prioritise digital fundraising rather than seeing it as the poor relation, as not all, but some organisations do. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about 3 things that you can do to review your digital marketing efforts. And if there's one thing that you remember about today's presentation, it should be talk to your users. That is the number one thing I am telling every organisation at the moment. Even if you do, say, just 5 user interviews, talking to your donors, your supporters about what they think of your digital marketing efforts. Even if you just do that, then that is going to give you a steer on what's effective and what you need to improve. Obviously, that needs to be backed up, as I say in point 2 here, with looking at the data. So looking at what Google Analytics, what Facebook Insights, what your email marketing newsletter analytics are telling you as well. So having that qual and that quant data and looking at that bigger picture together about what is going well here, what can we build on, what's engaging people at this time. Also identifying the key things that needs to be improved. Both those things in totality will give you some very valuable insights into how you take your digital marketing to the next level. And then finally, I would advise that benchmarking yourself against other organisations is absolutely key. So there you might want to look at, say, other health charities, if you're a health charity, but equally think about who the competition is, as it were, in the context of your users. So, for example, there was a youth charity we were working with a little while ago doing a digital content review, and one of the competitors that they wanted to look at was a well-known online retailer, because they knew that that group was talking to exactly the same audience that they wanted to talk to. And by doing that, there's some very interesting insights that came out of that. So I think there's something there about understanding who your users would also be diverting their attention and potentially their funds to as well. So what do we focus on now? Well, that process that I just mentioned of talking regularly to your donors and your supporters, finding out where they're at, what's changed them during the pandemic, what they're looking for from content. That's very much, to my mind, got to be a continuous cycle. So really making sure you're getting stuck into the data, but also having those conversations really regularly. And then folding that process into the cycle of testing out new ideas. So I guarantee that when you sit down, you have a look at the insights from those interviews, also looking at the analytics as well, there will come, even if it's just a small number, of new ideas, new types of content, new types of campaigns that you could run. And getting into that habit of continually testing these new concepts, learning from the results, and then looking at where you can improve things is absolutely key for this especially fast-paced, very volatile environment that we are working in at the moment. But also, I would argue, for ultimately achieving great success in digital marketing. And that's where this speed of response is so absolutely key, as I say in point 3 here. People's habits, the way they consume digital, all the other changes that are going on in their lives at the moment, obviously have changed so fast and so rapidly this year, and no one is in a state of a steady state at the moment. Everyone's still living in a slightly chaotic way with all these different changes that are going on with school and work and any other announcements that the government makes. So I think we all have to continuously look at how we can improve what we do in digital marketing so we can stay one step ahead of where our donors and supporters are at. And that's why talking to them and learning from the data is absolutely key. I just wanted to share finally some quick resources for you. So obviously the Charity Digital Skills Report has lots more information about how charities are tackling digital marketing and other areas of digital. The Charity Digital Code of Practice as well, also a free resource, something very useful to influence your trustees and your senior managers as you look to improve your best practice in digital across the board. And as part of that, if you are looking to help your board get to grips with digital, we've got a COVID-19 digital checklist for trustees. And all of these resources are open and accessible and completely free for the sector to use. So I hope they're useful for you as well. Thank you for listening. That's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the Charity Digital Skills Report, but also some of the things you can do now, what to focus on. I hope that's been useful, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
That's fantastic. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me, Zoe?
I can indeed.
Good. That was really useful. Thank you. I just thought I'd add quickly before we go into the questions. I think something that I can kind of chip in there. If we looked at some of your key challenges that you volunteered in the chat section down the side, some key ones there about information overload, building relationships remotely, low engagement on social, and not providing content that people want. One of the 3 suggestions of Zoe's, which I really am a kind of big advocate for, is this talking to users. And it's so common that often a content strategy is based on either out-of-date information or a lot of assumptions about, who your audience are, or what do they want, or, what don't they want, etc. And sometimes just, not being afraid to actually ask people, just genuinely ask people, whether that's in the form of something online like a survey, or physically, not so easy at the moment obviously, but maybe virtually getting people involved in a conversation and a dialogue, and asking them some of these questions just to sanity check your own assumptions about who they are and their language and what they're interested in. If you do that, that's going to help you cut through all of the other content that's out there. It's going to help with your engagement. It's going to help you make sure that anything you do provide in the way of content is what people genuinely want. Eliminate waste and, putting your time and resource into producing content that's just for the sake of it, that's not really going to hit home. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of back that up. We've done quite a lot of work doing content consumption research for pharma companies and medical and other areas where they just weren't getting the cut through. And then when we actually asked their audience what they wanted, it was really quite alarming in some instances, but certainly eye-opening, the responses, and then they were able to shape it from there. So I think that's a really, really useful tip. So in terms of some questions that have been coming in, I know that a couple of questions were raised by people before the actual event, if you're still kind of thinking about questions at the moment. One question that came up quite often was to do with skills, and particularly if budgets are tight at the moment and you can't just go out and hire new people in your team to be able to kind of cater for these things. What skills should you be looking to have internally within your team, and even if that requires developing individuals or training, etc., but what's going to help future-proof or get your team geared up for the challenges that the next 12 months is going to face? So have you got any thoughts on that, Zoe?
I think getting those foundation skills in right is absolutely key. So obviously the thing that we saw in the charity digital skills report was that whilst there were very good skills in social media, that excellent performance was not consistent across things like email marketing, making the most of your website and analytics, and managing, understanding, doing more with your data. So I think making sure you up to a consistently high standard across the team in all of those areas is really important. It might be that within your own team, you want to maybe do a bit of mini analysis of exactly where all the different team members are at. Because what I sometimes find is you go in and you talk to individual teams, and actually there's that person who everyone thinks is great at analytics, but who's also very good at another area, and no one's really making the most of that person as a resource. So I think raising the bar on those key skills is important. And if you're on a tight budget, the good news is there's still lots that you can do. So one approach that we often take is to ask the people who are good at this stuff, where did you learn it? So where do you go for your information? Perhaps there are particular email newsletters that you sign up to. Perhaps there's a particular YouTube channel of someone who's brilliant at Excel or something like that you always go back to time and again. So what free resources out there are people already using? And then make sure that those are communicated across the team. So you've almost got a crowdsource, even if it's a really simple toolkit that everyone can use, and then bring the team together as well, because I think that spirit of learning together is really important, to get them to talk about what you have learned. So we recommend to people that as part of team meetings, you make sure that you're feeding back about some of the resources you found helpful and what the implications are for your charity's digital marketing.
I think that's really useful. And again, I think one thing I'd just add, again, very specific to the kind of area that we're familiar with, is it's very common for us to find that a lot of time and effort goes into creating content, and often what's neglected is thinking about what's going to happen with that content once it's created. So it gets pushed onto the normal social channels, it sits there, and you kind of have this, if we build it, they will come mentality. But there's a lot of good training material out there, a lot of free resource to upskill your team on how to amplify or distribute content. So how to, really build your reach. So I think don't neglect that side of things, making sure that you put as much time and attention into what's going to happen after you've produced your content and it's sitting on your social channels. And it's a relatively easy thing to get skilled up and be familiar with. So that's all really useful stuff. We've got a couple of other questions come in. So Rich asked about in-source or outsource, pros or cons. That sounds like a half-day session, Rich. Thanks. In-source or outsource, any thoughts, Zoe?
I don't know whether it's a controversial view, but I think charities need to be able to be as self-sufficient as they can with digital marketing. So I'm actually in favour of them having the balance tipped more in favour of insourcing, and then perhaps outsourcing to more of a strategic review type stuff.
I'd actually agree with that, which is obviously slightly controversial, being as we're an agency who rely on people outsourcing. But I think it's about the more you can handle internally, the better. But it's about understanding where your limitations are, isn't it? And what you can and can't cope with. So, when you've got strengths, play to that, and then use the external resource sparingly, but where you genuinely need that support. And if you don't kind of use it excessively, that's going to help free up the budget so that you can use it when you really do need to. But I'd be with you, Zoe, on that one, particularly at the moment, when budgets are going to be under pressure, aren't they? Okay, we've got a question here about recruitment marketing from Kerry. I'm the recruitment marketer for my organisation and run separate social media accounts from our main pages. As we should be, we are very focused on our supporters to generate income, but as a result, recruitment is often sidelined or seen as important. How can I help change this?
That's a great question. Can you go on mute, Ben? Brilliant. Thank you very much. When you say sidelined there, is that in terms of budget, or it's not seen as important? Are you able to say a bit more about the context, just so I can advise? I can offer some advice just in the meantime while that information's coming through. Just as a general observation, and I think that what I have seen in quite a number of charities is that obviously social media is such an important way to recruit now, but things like the big fundraising campaign or the big news story always seems to get a bit more priority in terms of the content that gets pushed out there. I think what you need to do as a recruiter, and I think this is good practice in terms of how recruitment is changing anyway at the moment, it's a big trend I've seen over the last few years, is to make sure that you're out there telling a really, really good story. Sometimes when I see charity recruitment content on social media, I don't think this is intentional, but it can feel a bit transactional. So it's a bit like, here's a job, this is what it pays, this is what we expect you to do. Whereas if you flip that and you talk about our organisation is making a massive difference, which you'll be talking about on your digital channels anyway, come and be part of it. Come and help us make a difference. And this is the employee experience that you will get. And this is how we invest in people's learning. That's a big, big trend that I'm starting to see in the corporate world. And I think charities can absolutely adopt that because it fits beautifully into this wider content strategy, which you will probably have anyway, about that fundamental story of where we're making a difference as an organisation. At all levels. Oh yes, you've given me some more information. Thank you. That's brilliant. Best thing you can do there is to show people some examples of how other organisations are doing it. So some examples you might want to look at. Last time I checked, ActionAid were really, really good at taking this story-led recruitment approach. And just to, in case it gives your senior leadership team a bit of useful context, my frustration with the way that a lot of organisations generally tend to recruit about here's a vacancy, here's a vacancy, here's a vacancy, is that you essentially need to reinvent the wheel every time you're going out there with a job. Whereas if you can tell a really good, engaging story about why you are a fantastic place to work, why you make a massive difference, then you will have a warm pipeline of people who are just interested to work for you. And then when you go out there with a vacancy, they'll be warm and ready. So it's actually, there's a real parallel with how you would fundraise, because to be honest, when you do that, I'd recommend that same approach. Community, shared values, what's the impact you're making? So I think show them ActionAid, and then some other examples of who you could look at in the corporate world. I mean, this is how O2 are recruiting as well. So it's very much about building that community of people who are interested in what they do. I think Deloitte as well, they're doing some stuff around their graduate recruitment schemes, which again is very much about come and be part of how we have shared values and are making a difference. I think this is a trend more charities could follow, and again, it would be absolutely aligned with how they do digital content anyway. But start by showing them those 3 organisations, and actually I think O2 had taken a lot of their recruitment in-house. It had, by taking this approach, this impact-led approach through their content, it had saved them a huge amount. They didn't need to go to recruiters in the same way as they once did. They could insource, they could do it themselves. So I think start with that, show them how those other organisations are doing it, and then let us all know how it goes. I'm sure Ben and I would be delighted to hear how you get on.
I'm popping you on mute in between. We're causing an echo when the other one's chatting. Just one extra point on that. Again, we've also experienced doing that with River Island, with their recruitment site, trying to look at IT recruitment for them and building a community based around content first, and then driving the kind of recruitment activities, so kind of doing it in reverse, and it has proved to be really successful for them as well. We've got one more question. We're right at the end of our time, and we're going to try and keep these sessions on time. So this came in from SAGG Foundation. My eyes are not great on the screen. Saying, I'm the founder of a girls' education charity and the only one with digital skills. Any advice for a one-woman run charity? I'll unmute you again.
Oh, fantastic. As someone who's the mum to a little girl, more power to your elbow. That sounds like a fantastic initiative. What I would say, I'm going to assume there you've got a fairly small team, is I think there's lots of stuff out there now to help you. So, for example, Charity Comms do lots and lots of brilliant resource to lots of training, lots of webinars. They've got lots of content on their site, particularly to help smaller charities grow their digital skills further. So I would start by joining some networks in the sector like that. There's also a really good Slack group called the Digital Charities Group, and it's full of people like you, lots of people from small organisations, all of whom are really passionate about digital and want to keep using it to help their charity. So join some networks, grow your skills further, and good luck with what you're doing. Sounds amazing.
And I will just add there, also this comment about engagement across our social media platforms is going down. What content types do you think would work during this time? I mean, I guess the one question there is about your audience, and it comes back to this kind of how much you understand who they are, what channels they use, times of day, device, etc. will make a difference. I think generally, from our experience, it's not rocket science to say that video content is performing well at the moment. It's easier to tell a more emotive story with video than it is just with words and editorial content. Obviously, that has its own challenges trying to actually get it produced in the current climate as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but generally, visual content and stuff which can be shared is performing well, but it really does depend on your audience. Anything that you'd like to just add to that, Zoe, before we wrap up?
I think again it comes back to the point of talking to users, and I would perhaps rephrase the question slightly. So I don't think, from my perspective, not so much about what type of content is going to work. You've got to go and talk back to your users and find out how their habits are changing. So previously, for the content that my agency shares, we always found that morning commuting time worked really well. Not anymore. Afternoons and evenings, much better. People on, doing the school run, they are much more likely to have got through a good morning's work and they'll be willing to go on social engage. So you're going to probably have to do quite a lot of testing, but talk to your users first, find out how their digital habits are changing, then do some testing, and you will get there. You will get your engagement up, but it's that process of learning and testing that's really key to it.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Zoe. We're going to wrap things up there. We're going to try and keep these to our 30 minutes as we promised everyone and not run on too much. Really interesting session. I'd like to really thank Zoe for her hard work and coming in and speaking on this subject. It's been really, really interesting. And thanks to all of you for getting involved as well. And there's nothing worse than when we throw it open and it's just tumbleweed coming back. So it's been really good to have you involved. Just to emphasize, we will send around to you a link to the recording of this, which you can view it again at your own leisure. For any of you that are interested, we'll also invite you all to next month's session. So at the end of October, I think it's Wednesday the 28th of October, we'll be running a session which isn't specifically for the charity sector, but it will be on the subject of search engine optimization and how to build a kind of organic search strategy, one that isn't heavily reliant on link building and outreach, although obviously those are important factors, but we want to look at some of the organic search tips. So we're going to have an expert from an SEO agency sharing some tips, and also one of our clients that's built a very successful organic strategy based around content, a big insurer, will be sharing some of their thoughts as well. So I think whatever sector you're in, that will be relevant if search is something that you are concerned about. So we will send the invite around for that. If any of you can join us, you're more than welcome to. And nothing left for me to say other than thanks very much to all of you for joining. And I'll unmute Zoe quickly. Thank you very much, Zoe.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Ben, and thank you, everyone. Love the questions.
Thanks, guys. We'll speak to you all soon. Cheers.